It began with a detail so small it was almost invisible. An unlocked door on an otherwise quiet street, just before dawn. Nothing appeared broken. Nothing appeared stolen. Yet the house felt wrong to the people who knew it best, as if something essential had been removed without leaving a mark. That feeling would linger long after the police lights faded, long after the neighborhood returned to routine, and long after the case acquired its name. A crime that left more questions than answers. The victim was Evan Carter, 36, a systems analyst known for precision, restraint, and a life lived carefully on the edges of notice. Friends described him as reliable to a fault. No debts, no enemies, no history of violence. The kind of person investigators quietly hope isn't the center of a mystery, because mysteries cling hardest to people who leave no obvious trail. The first officer on scene, Detective Laura Mitchell, noticed what others nearly missed. Evan's phone was on the kitchen counter, powered off. His wallet was in the bedroom, untouched. The car sat in the driveway. Whatever had happened to him, it didn't resemble a robbery, and it didn't resemble a sudden escape. It resembled interruption. At first, the working theory was simple: voluntary disappearance. Adults walk away from their lives more often than people want to believe. But that theory frayed quickly under scrutiny. Evan had made plans. He had emailed his sister, Rachel Carter, the night before, promising to help her move the following weekend. Rachel would later say there was nothing unusual in his tone. No farewell hidden between the lines, no emotional residue. Just Evan being Evan. As days passed, the investigation widened but did not deepen. Neighbors reported nothing. Surveillance cameras along the street captured only ordinary movement. Headlights, joggers, a delivery truck that never stopped. The absence of evidence began to feel less like a gap and more like a presence. Something deliberately quiet. The midpoint came not with a revelation, but with a correction. A technician reviewing cell tower data noticed a brief signal ping from Evan's phone, hours after it was believed to be powered off, originating several miles outside the city. Not long enough for a call, not long enough for a message, just long enough to challenge the idea that Evan had chosen to vanish. The case shifted then, away from where he went and toward what interrupted him. The cell phone ping that once seemed like a glitch now took on weight. Its location aligned with a stretch of industrial land undergoing redevelopment at the time. Temporary offices, short-term leases, minimal oversight. No cameras remained. No records survived beyond basic permits. A place design detective Mitchell reconsidered earlier assumptions. Rachel revisited conversations she had dismissed as ordinary. Even the investigators began to see Evan not as a man who disappeared, but as a man whose life intersected with something he never anticipated. And yet, no body was found, no suspect named, no crime officially confirmed. Years later, the case remains open, not frozen, but breathing quietly in the background. What stands out now is not the mystery itself, but the people left behind, still navigating uncertainty with dignity. Rachel continues to advocate for periodic review. Detective Mitchell still keeps the file accessible, updated with every new technique, every new angle. Some questions remain unanswered. That is the truth of this case. But not all mysteries end in despair. Sometimes, resolution takes the form of clarity rather than closure, the understanding that what was lost mattered, that what was known was real, and that silence does not erase significance. In the end, this is not only a story about what happened to Evan Carter. It is a story about how absence reshapes lives, how assumptions can mislead, and how truth often reveals itself slowly, patiently, to those willing to keep looking. And the search, quietly, continues. The case did not go cold all at once. It cooled gradually, like a room everyone kept leaving and re-entering, each time expecting something to feel different. For Detective Laura Mitchell, the file on Evan Carter never gathered dust. It gathered annotations, marginal notes, question marks that refused to be erased. Because the more distance time created, the clearer one thing became. Evan had not disappeared into nothing. He had passed through something unfinished. What changed the direction of the investigation wasn't a breakthrough so much as a human decision. Rachel Carter stopped waiting for updates and started asking better questions. She requested records others had overlooked: parking receipts, keycard logs from Evan's office, routine data that felt too mundane to matter. In doing so, she forced the case to slow down, to look inward instead of outward. That was when a pattern emerged. In the weeks before Evan vanished, he had altered his routines in subtle ways. Leaving work later, taking different routes home. Small deviations that meant nothing individually, but together suggested awareness, an unspoken calculation. Not fear exactly, caution. The kind that comes from noticing something you can't yet name. A second review of Evan's professional life revealed a quiet tension. As a systems analyst, he had recently flagged inconsistencies in a vendor's access permissions. Nothing criminal on the surface, just anomalies that didn't align. He had documented them, escalated them, then stopped following up. Not because the issue was resolved, but because someone higher up told him it was handled. That word, handled, became a pivot point. Detective Mitchell began to reconsider the assumption that Evan was merely adjacent to his own disappearance. What if he wasn't the center, but the witness? What if the interruption in his life wasn't personal at all, but incidental, wrong place, right integrity? To be temporary and therefore forgettable. And yet, even here there was no violence, no trace of struggle, just another absence where something should have been. What unsettled Mitchell most was what didn't happen after Evan disappeared. No withdrawals, no attempts to access accounts, no digital footprint trying to reassemble a life elsewhere. This wasn't a man starting over. This was a man who had been stopped mid-sentence. As months turned into years, the case settled into a different phase. Not inactive, but reflective. Rachel adjusted her life around uncertainty, learning to live without answers while refusing to let them be dismissed. Mitchell remained methodical, preserving the case not as a tragedy, but as a responsibility. And then, quietly, something shifted again. A former contractor, now retired, contacted the department after recognizing Evan's name during a routine cold case review. He didn't offer accusations, only a memory of a conversation that ended abruptly, of concern brushed aside, of being told some questions were better left unasked. It wasn't evidence, but it was alignment. For the first time, the case felt less like a void and more like a shape. Still incomplete, still fragile, but no longer unknowable. Evan Carter had mattered. His attention had mattered, and whatever had intersected with his life had left behind more than silence. Some mysteries don't demand resolution all at once. Some ask only that we keep faith with the truth, that we continue to look, not because we expect certainty, but because dignity requires it. And as the investigation edged forward once more, one thing became clear: the story of Evan. Time has a way of changing what evidence can say. It strips away urgency, ego, and noise, leaving only what endures. When Detective Laura Mitchell reopened Evan Carter's file for a comprehensive review, it wasn't because she expected a confession or a sudden discovery. It was because enough time had passed for people to speak without fear of consequence, and for truth to surface not as accusation, but as context. The retired contractor's statement, once only a fragment, began to connect with others. Not proof, but convergence. Independent recollections that shared the same tone. Quiet pressure, subtle discouragement, decisions rerouted without explanation. No one claimed wrongdoing outright. They didn't have to. What they described was a system skilled at smoothing over discomfort, at absorbing irregularities until they disappeared from view. Evan's role came into focus with unexpected clarity. He wasn't investigating corruption. He wasn't chasing justice. He was doing his job carefully, and that care had brushed against something fragile. Something that relied on being ignored. Rachel Carter listened as Mitchell explained the revised understanding. Not a solution, but a reframing. Evan had not vanished because he was reckless or secretive. He had vanished because he noticed what others were trained to overlook. That realization didn't answer every question, but it did something equally important. It returned agency to Evan's life. He had not been passive. He had been present. Advances in data analysis provided one final layer of insight. Old records, once siloed, were cross-referenced with new tools. Patterns emerged, not enough to prosecute, not enough to accuse, but enough to confirm that Evans' last known movements aligned with professional, not personal obligations. The case could finally say what it was not. Not a voluntary disappearance, not an act of despair, not a mystery born of chaos. For Rachel, that distinction mattered. It allowed grief to settle into something steadier, remembrance without doubt, advocacy without anger. She began speaking publicly, not about conspiracy, but about the cost of silence and the value of integrity in ordinary work. Evans' name became associated not with disappearance, but with attention, with the idea that noticing matters. The department updated the case status. Still open, but no longer undefined. Detective Mitchell filed her final note with care, aware that resolution doesn't always arrive as an ending. Sometimes it arrives as alignment, when the facts, the people, and the meaning finally face the same direction. Evan Carter's story did not conclude with an arrest or a recovered body. Concluded with clarity, with dignity restored, with the understanding that a life can be interrupted without being erased. Some crimes leave questions behind, but this one left something else as well. A reminder that truth does not require spectacle to endure, and that even in absence, a person's choices can still be known. And in that knowing, the case found its quiet end.